Domination from start to finish, and rarely has a single match shown a tactical chasm between two managers so clearly. And this was a case of Flick setting up a game plan and Arbeloa showing essentially zero adaptations to what was happening on the pitch throughout the 90. So let's first examine the tactics when Barca were on the ball. Defensively, Madrid was set up in a 4-4-2, initially pressing quite high before eventually setting into a mid-block as Los Blancos' defensive struggles became clearer. And this shape would set up the defining dynamic of the game. By default, Barcelona had the potential to overload Real Madrid in this region, but especially when Madrid were pressing high, there was an even bigger risk of being outnumbered in the midfield, with the hope being by applying enough pressure in the initial phase, they could break up the build-up before it began. But here's the thing, La Blaugrana had multiple ways of getting around this, as in the first phase, Garcia could tuck in as the third man to give them the +1 advantage. Alternatively, Barcelona could actually stay in a similar shape, with their fullbacks dropping deeper, which had the knock-on effect of drawing Diaz and Bellingham even higher up in the press. And both these scenarios let Barcelona exploit Real Madrid. Dani Olmo was consistently the highest midfielder, with the potential to find space between the lines, often choosing to stay high and helping to pin the centre-backs deeper. But the most important dynamic was the relationship between Ferran and Olmo. From a Madrid perspective, one of the most important elements of making this kind of pressing structure work is either making it impossible to get past the first line of pressure, think City defending in an uber-narrow 4-2-4 in recent weeks, or having proactive centre-backs who essentially become the third midfielder in the defensive phase, so think Arsenal and their aggressive man-to-man pressing. Madrid opted for the latter, but Barca rendered it ineffective because of the opposing movements between this pair that Madrid just could not handle. Both were capable of dropping in and creating a hole in the defense, while the other would look to exploit the space created with a run in behind and a longer ball over the top or a through ball. And the second goal is the perfect example of this. As with the ball wide, this time we see Ferran and Olmo in similar positions, taking up the attention of the centre-backs. As Asensio steps up onto Ferran dropping deep, Olmo makes the opposing move, and this opens up the room that Torres can then attack for the finish. But the movement deep was not always just for decoy purposes. Especially in the scenarios where the ball started deep and wide, one or both men could look to drop much deeper. And again, with the Madrid pivots being this aggressive in the press, and the centre-backs being uncomfortable pushing this high all the time, the player who had dropped deep could receive with time to play a pass. With the ball side centre-back this far out of position, and the other having to keep an eye on the high man, the wingers often got extremely easy isolations. And both wingers, but Rashford in particular, had a lot of success in using pace and physicality against their opposite number. And here's the thing, even after the break defensively at least, Madrid showed very little adaptation, meaning that throughout the match, Barcelona could consistently look to use these patterns of play to try and break down the defense. And before we touch on what happened when Barcelona were out of possession, with the season reaching its end, now is the perfect time to elevate your tactical knowledge ahead of the World Cup. So if you're somebody looking to go from just watching analysis to doing it yourself, check out Football Fundamentals through the link down in the description below. Football Fundamentals is my free program that will teach you the basics of analysis over the course of 30 days. And like I said, it's completely free. Barcelona were even more aggressive in the press, especially when Madrid looked to build short, with the ball side winger often looking to join Torres, while Pedri and Olmo were on the pivots. And where out of possession, Bellingham was expected to be the left midfielder. In possession, these scenarios gave him the flexibility and the opportunity to drift into his natural position. But with Barcelona already having a free man there, it was simple enough for them to cover. The potential room was instead on the flanks, but Barca would essentially shift into a back three, allowing the ball side fullback to press his opposite number. But where Real had success is when they were initially starting the play deep to draw Barca even higher up the pitch. And with the likes of Bellingham being up the pitch, he and Gonzalo Garcia could try win the first ball with a flick on or a knockdown. And Barcelona's defense was not perfect. There were big disadvantages to their usual aggressive high line, primarily the space they left in behind. So anytime the press wasn't quite perfect and a Madrid man got on the ball with a little bit of time and space, Vinicius and Bellingham were always willing to take a chance on the run in behind. And in possession, Los Blancos did adapt a lot more and looked to create overloads of their own by having Diaz invert to create a midfield box. But the effectiveness of this depended on what was happening deeper, as often, to have more time on the ball, a third man deep was not optional due to the Barcelona pressure, meaning that at times, Trent would tuck in during the first phase. And with essentially no one wide in these scenarios, Cancelo's job became a lot easier, as he could then just track Diaz's movements without having to hold the width. But when it was Tchouaméni or Camavinga dropping in, especially if the oppressor followed their movements, the 3 versus 2 was a lot more dangerous if they got the ball past the first line of pressure. A player who saw a lot of the ball was Fran Garcia, as he always held the width unlike Trent, and he and Vinicius threatened to turn the tide. Especially when Rashford was high up, Vinicius could drift into the half space and look to overload Garcia, who was less comfortable pressing in these scenarios because whenever he did, he was potentially leaving his centre-back isolated. But the problem was, when he stayed deep, it became a lot easier for Madrid to progress down that left flank and get into crossing positions or allow the opportunity for combinations in the box. Overall, Flick did not have to reinvent the wheel to bypass this Madrid team, and at times it looked like Barca were cruising throughout the game, meaning that they have now clinched La Liga ahead of their eternal rivals. But what did you make of the match? Drop anything else you noticed tactically down in the comments below. And if you're curious about how many similarities there are between Flick's Bayern and his Barca side, check out this video on screen now, and don't forget to sign up for Football Fundamentals through the link down below.